There's a large body of research in political science that draws on experimental evidence to judge the effectiveness of ads. So they'll put people into a laboratory setting. Now these are kind of comfortable settings. The people who are involved in the study don't necessarily know they're being tested. They sign a release. There's all sorts of consent that goes on. But they'll be asked to show up to watch a 30-minute show. And embedded within the show is a 30-second political advertisement. And people in a control group don't see the political ad. People in the treatment group see an ad or a version of the ad. And experimenters will look at the effects on attitudes based on viewing versus not seeing an ad. And that's how they judge effectiveness. According to those experimental pieces of evidence, political advertisements can have a variety of effects. I was talking earlier about contrast ads. Contrast ads tend to do pretty well. They tend to move the dial, and they tend to move the dial across the board. That is, partisans supporting the candidate and partisans of the other side tend to be positively influenced towards a candidate when they put on a contrast ad. The attack ads have a mixed effect. There's some famous work by Stephen N. Soliber and Shanto Iyengar from the early to mid-1990s arguing that attack advertisements have a peculiar effect. They do affect people's views of the candidates, but they also demobilize voters. They make voters feel worse about the process, and they actually decrease turnout, especially amongst independent voters. Now, this has been a controversial finding. There's been some pushback by people like John Geer at Vanderbilt, Rick Law at Rutgers, and others who have argued that, well, the evidence about whether attack advertising demobilizes voters and lowers turnout is contentious. And they've cited some broad aggregate pieces of evidence that suggest that's not the case. But it's, so there are different ways to judge these advertising effects. Experimental evidence tends to be the most common and perhaps the most powerful because experiments can be used to assert causality. This ad caused this effect. Other bits of evidence where you take, say, the overall tone of a campaign or many campaigns and then look at turnout and see how turnout varies according to the tone of the campaign, they suggested maybe negative ads or attack ads don't do as much harm to turnout as we thought. Then you can use survey evidence or field experiments, a lot of different ways to assess the effectiveness of ads, but usually we're relying on aggregate turnout and overall tone, as judged by a researcher, or experiments. And they find actually very different things, which is one of the, perhaps one of the most interesting and debated propositions in political science right now.